This is the Queen's Eye view out of the Phantom. I'm sitting exactly where Her Majesty would sit when being driven around for stately visits and tours when she comes to Australia. And there's Philip's seat. Righto, Robert, off we go. And off we go. Here we are at the Royal Paddock, where we'll have a better look at both inside and outside the Queen's Phantom. Tell us about this beautiful Rolls-Royce, Brian.
What we've got here is a 1967 Phantom 5, which is currently owned by the Sir Henry Royce Foundation, and it began life as the Vice-Regal car, ordered to the specifications of Her Majesty and bought by the Australian government for use by Her Royal Highness or Her Majesty when she was in Australia, and for visiting dignitaries and the Governor-General.
Well, let's have a look inside this beautiful car. Oh, we've got a standing corgi here.
Well, he's
Move her
almost
out
a
the
corgi,
way.
he's a Spitz, yeah.
That's right. Ah, so we've got a split bench here. Oh, in fact, we have two separate seats, I beg your pardon. Acres of walnut. So this is the chauffeur's compartment. I think we're showing 19078 on the clock, so we're about just over 100,000 perhaps.
The colour combination was actually ordered by Her Majesty herself. She wanted brown leather in the front and cream leather in the back with the pale pink silk pull-down blinds.
Oh, these are suicide doors, aren't they? So we've got to get in through the other way. So this is where Her Majesty would step up into the car, her seat there.
And in fact,
Philip's
where
on the
your left hand is now is Her Majesty's seat, right behind the chauffeur.
Yes.
You can see there's a knob to wind the seat up, so the seat goes up or the seat comes down depending upon the seating position, so Her Majesty could wave to the crowds and be seen. There is of course a pull down cocktail cabinet.
Isn't it beautifully done? Oh, excellent. I think that'd be a sherry, wouldn't it?
I can't guarantee what it is, Vince. Might have been a sherry, could have been a gin and tonic. We've got the drop-down jump seats for the equerry.
Oh, I see. Oh, excuse me. Oh, right.
So the equerry would sit there, hop out, open the door for Her Majesty and for Philip or for the Governor-General. The individual air conditioning controls. I'll just hop in and I'll show you some of the features.
Thank you.
So we have the radio for the rear compartment, microphone controls to speak to the driver when the division was up, fluorescent reading lights in the rear.
And some blinds here to come down on these windows.
Absolutely. And the microphone.
Oh, yes, right. So it's for the Queen to tell the driver to move on.
Well, go faster, go slower. And if you just let me get into the front, I will illustrate the division for you.
And Mulliner Park Ward, I think you were saying, were responsible
Mulliner
for
Park
the
Ward, yes.
for the body. Oh. Yes, indeed. Well, that cuts the driver off, doesn't it?
So that's soundproof glass.
So there's soundproof glass, plus there's the blind
Yes.
that could be pulled down as well if Her Majesty wanted some privacy.
Yes, absolutely.
I see. Very good.
It's Mulliner Park Ward. The chassis and engine were delivered by Rolls-Royce, and then Mulliner Park Ward made the body. And we're told it actually began life as 5 large flat sheets of alloy, and it was all handcrafted into this shape. Now there are 2 of them. 2 were ordered by the Australian government, both for use in Canberra. This spent most of its time in Victoria, and then it came to New South Wales, and I'll explain that in a minute. And the New South Wales car went into private ownership, and now it's also in the Sir Henry Royce Foundation collection, but it's at our Coolum showrooms.
Right.
This is not an armoured vehicle, and the reason it's not armoured is that Her Majesty did not want it to be armoured, and that was fine in the 1960s, in the 1970s, but by the time we get to the 1980s, the government realised that armoured vehicles were actually required. So this was sold, and it was bought by John Matheson and Jean-Yves, who took it on the Overland Rally from Paris to Peking. It did that trip very successfully without breaking down, apart from breaking a rear spring, which I believe was repaired by hand in Mongolia, and that rear spring is still intact today.
Yeah.
Jean and Jean then very kindly donated this to the Sir Henry Royce Foundation, and the Rolls-Royce Owners Club of Australia New South Wales branch has undertaken to look after it here in Sydney. So it goes to events. We try to conserve it, which means being a vehicle it needs to be used, but used sparingly. So it's a delightful car to drive. It sits very firmly on the road, on the highway. It's very easy and very light to steer, and despite the fact it weighs 3 tonnes and it's 6.3 metres long, it's actually a very nimble car.
Wow. Yes, it certainly is a big vehicle, isn't it?
Well, there's not too many carports it'll fit in, Vince.
No, that's right. Yes, it's got some presence on the road, hasn't it? Well, thank you, Brian. Let's have a look underneath the bonnet if we could, please.
Certainly. So what we've got here, Vince, is the engine bay, 6.2 litre V8, which has continued right through in production, and it's still being used in production at the moment. It's about to come to the end of its life, but that's an extraordinary length of time for an engine to be used. It's very low compression, designed for use in the colonies, and in particular it's designed for very low speed travel. The rear axle ratio is such that at idle it crawls along at 4 miles an hour very, very smoothly. One of the unique features of the Phantom 5 is that while all other manufacturers were using all-round disc brakes, this still uses the same braking system that was introduced on the Phantom 2, and that is it's all-round drum brakes with a servo that runs off the back of the gearbox. So it's not a servo system as we'd understand it today, but it actually runs off the back of the gearbox. Why? Because when it's in ceremonial use, the brakes don't squeak. There is absolutely no noise from the brakes whatsoever. So Rolls-Royce didn't go ahead with using discs on these. It didn't go ahead with discs until the Silver Shadow, and these drum brakes are extraordinarily effective at pulling up the car from speed.
Well, they'd have to be too, wouldn't they? Because as you said, it's a fairly heavy car at 3 tonnes.
Well, it's certainly not a lightweight, but believe me, if you need to do a panic stop on the freeway, it does pull up straight, it's true, and with very, very little effort.
Right. Good to know.
You can see the plumbing for the air conditioning. There is air conditioning to the front for the chauffeur, but there's also a very large Frigidaire unit in the boot for climate control in the rear compartment. and that was somewhat of a novelty back in the 1960s when the car was ordered.
Yes, indeed. So who's servicing this type of vehicle?
The servicing's done by Paradise Garage. Paul Lukes services the car, looks after it extremely well. It's very, very reliable. I've never had it break down on me. Unfortunately, I've never had a flat tyre in it either, because the wheels are rather large, as you can see. They take a bit of manoeuvring. It originally came out with cross-ply tyres. We've got some radials on it now because they have obviously improved the handling. And the nice thing about it is, on the freeway, it tracks straight and true.
Well, a magnificent vehicle, Brian. Thank you very much for your time, and we look forward to seeing the vehicle at future club events.
You will indeed, Vince. Thank you very much.